All right, Larry Krueger here from the Pig and a Pickle Krug Show with a little 49er video. The latest on Brandon Aiyuk and where he could be headed. We'll talk about that coming up next. But first, we're brought to you by Pig and a Pickle, the best barbecue in all of Northern California. Check them out in Emeryville and Corte Madera. They're open 7 days a week from 11 a.m. till 8 p.m. or until they run out. We're also brought to you by Marin Auto Glass, marinautoglass.com. And our sponsors this month in February, Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. They're at 205 Cypress Avenue in Pacific Grove. Call Anthony Catania at 831-521-5264. And we're also brought to you by valleyhillroofing.net. They're at 209-481-6851. And both of the links to their websites are listed in the description below. All right, let's talk a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk. What's going to happen with Brandon Aiyuk? Are the Niners going to trade him? Are they going to re-sign him? Are they going to sign him to a contract extension that makes him happy? Or are they going to move him to a different team? On first blush, I think most 49er fans would say sign him. Absolutely sign him. There's no doubt you wouldn't sign this guy, right? He's in his prime. He's a key cog for Brock Purdy. He's the Niners' best receiver. He's not a diva. The guy blocks in the run game. He's, gone through different stages of his 49er career, but he's at this point, he's one of their star guys. I mean, he's one of the guys that they lean on to move the football. He had 75 catches this year. He had over 1,300 yards receiving in 2023. He was an all-pro wide receiver. Why wouldn't you sign him, right? Well, okay, that's the first notion is why wouldn't you sign this guy? And John Lynch has said he's called Aiyuk a priority as he enters his fifth-year option at $14 million. He said he'd like a player like Aiyuk to be, he said that you'd always like a player like Brandon Aiyuk, quote, to be part of you going forward. So, Lynch has definitely said that he'd like to have this guy on the team, but he's going to make $14 million this year, and you've got Debo making 28. So, do you want to spend $42 million this year on wide receivers when you're 32nd in the NFL in pass attempts? Does that even make sense to have two wide receivers taking up maybe close to $50 million of your cap when you're 32nd in the NFL in pass attempts and you're a run-first football team? So, that's really the question. There's plenty of teams out there that would love to get their hands on Brandon Aiyuk. Kansas City would love to have Aiyuk. The Raiders would love to have Aiyuk. There's a lot of talk coming out of New York. The New York Giants would love to have Brandon Aiyuk. So what are the Niners going to do? Well, Dan Graziano for ESPN went on Twitter today and said he thinks that the most likely outcome for Aiyuk is that the Niners will ultimately trade him to a team that will make him their number one wide receiver and pay him as such and feature him in their offense and throw him the ball a lot more than the Niners have. And that the Niners would wind up with a first-round pick in draft pick compensation coming back for Aiyuk. And I'm thinking about it. I'm like, well, what are the Niners going to do with that first-round pick? Last time they made this move, they had DeForest Buckner, and they chose Armstead over Buckner. And so they stayed with Armstead. They traded Buckner. They traded Buckner to the Colts. They got a first-round pick, and they turned that first-round pick into Javon Kinlaw. And essentially, they lost a guy in DeForest Buckner who commanded double teams, could rush the passer on the interior, and they got in return a player in Kinlaw who's strong, but that's really it. He's not really a pass rusher. He doesn't command double teams. He's had a hard time staying healthy because of the knee. This year he did stay healthy, but even so, he was just more of a force against the run, and he more absorbs. He doesn't make a lot of tackles. He absorbs offensive linemen and then keeps Greenlaw and Warner's legs free to run and hit and go make tackles in this defense. So it's not that Kinlaw is not good. It's just that he wasn't as good as DeForest Buckner. So what do the Niners do here? If Graziano is right, and they're going to pull the trigger on a trade, what do you do with the pick? If you get, if the New York Giants traded you their pick, I think they picked 6th overall. Do you invest that in Malik Neighbors, the wide receiver from LSU, who is a fantastic wide receiver? He might be a better big play wide receiver than Brandon Aiyuk. Or do you say, you know what, rookie receivers take a while to develop? Maybe go sign a replacement wide receiver in free agency. And Calvin Ridley's out there if you want Calvin Ridley. There's a number of guys that are free agent wide receivers that may not cost the same amount as Brandon Aiyuk. Maybe they go get the veteran receiver and draft Joe Alt. Maybe they what they really need is a right tackle. So if you're saying to me, what do they, if you want to get a right tackle, there's 2 premier right tackles in this draft. One is Taliesin Fuaga for Oregon State. Brawler, tough guy, looks like he could be a plug-and-play right guard, 325 pounds, loves to fight, great technician and great toughness and athleticism. And then there's J.C. Latham, who might be the blue-chip right tackle that they're looking for. 6'6", 335 pounds. He looks like an Alabama plug-and-play right tackle if I've ever seen one. I mean, he's big, he's strong, he's natural walking around at that weight. It's not like he's got to lift weights to get to 335. That's what he is. If you could add a player like Latham, maybe you could find a wide receiver later in the draft. There's people like Brian Thomas at LSU might be there at the end of the first round. They could go Brian Thomas. They could go Xavier Legette. They could wait until round 2 or 3 and go with Rice's kid, Brendan Rice. They could sign a free agent wide receiver and just build up the offensive line, go offensive line and defensive line in the first round. They definitely have their options of what they potentially could do. The question is, do you believe Graziano in his report that the most likely is that they're going to wind up trading Brandon Aiyuk for a first-round draft choice? All I'll say there is that, man, if you turn Brandon Aiyuk into a rookie receiver, man, you might be doing yourself a disservice because rookie receivers take sometimes 2 and 3 years to develop. And I like Malik Neighbors a lot. I think he's going to be a really good player. That's the receiver I'd want if I was trading Brandon Aiyuk. But if you're saying to me, what kind of numbers is Neighbors going to have next year, it's speculative. Rookie receivers often struggle, and Aiyuk will definitely have better numbers. So then the other question is, well, if you trade Aiyuk for a high pick, don't you have to go offensive line? Don't you have to go with Alt? Don't you have to go with Fuaga? Don't you have to go with J.C. Latham? Because you're never going to be up that high again to get that right tackle that you desperately need. So I do think it's interesting that now that NFL people are starting to kind of talk around the league, it sounds like the rumblings are more about the 49ers moving Aiyuk than signing Aiyuk. I think most people look at this the way that I look at this and just go, hey, realistically, you're gonna commit $50 million of your salary cap to 2 wide receivers when you are 32nd in the league in pass attempts and you barely ever pass. It probably is not the best use of the money. So anyway, something to think about. Graziano broke it all down. Check it out on ESPN.com. Thanks to Pig and a Pickle for being the title sponsor of The Krug Show. Thanks to ValleyHillRoofing.net. Thanks to Sharp Corner Sports Cards and Collectibles. And, of course, thanks to Marin Auto Glass as well. And thanks to all you guys for supporting The Krug Show on YouTube.